There'll be a
We're-
development agreement in place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They want comments until June.
Okay, no sign yet of anybody on there?
I just texted Tim and Deidre.
Let's wait.
All right.
Not live yet. It's CTM.
Started, we're waiting for a couple more members. I think we better get this going. Welcome.
Give them the right.
A little belatedly to the Planning Board, Chelmsford Planning Board meeting of December 15th, 2021. The meeting is being televised by Chelmsford Telemedia and conducted in person up here in room 204. And we will, of course, continue with the Zoom component until further notice. The information on getting into the Zoom meeting is in our agenda, which you can get on the town website. The call-in number is 929-205-6099. And with that, I guess we'll start. Let's hold on a sec, because we generally have a public input session. I don't see a lot of people here tonight, but let's at least give that a shot.
Well, Don't we, most of the time, we don't have a full board, at least let the applicant aware that we only
Yeah.
have so many board members, and,
I think the applicant's been watching us.
yeah, it should be part of the record.
Well, and when we get to them, if we haven't gotten any more members seated, then you'll have a decision as to whether you want to continue.
Well, this is a hearing on a proposed zoning change. It's not a application.
Right, so it's only a
for
straight
relief.
majority.
It's only a straight majority, and Mullen rule is not applicable in this circumstance. So-
Okay, if the Mullen rule's not applicable, then perhaps we can continue. In any case, before we get started with UMass West Campus, let me open it up to public input. Is there anybody here who would like to speak to the board on any matter other than the matters that are before us?
Like, just a point of procedure, I think if the Mullins rule doesn't apply, if members don't come here before you open the public
Hey, we
forum,
got
then
another.
they can't sit. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying
No.
the Mullen rule is not applicable because there's not the planning board's not issuing a decision on an application
Okay,
tonight.
so they
Okay,
can
yeah.
come in after.
Right.
Correct.
All right.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right, well, okay, we have a decent majority now. Is anybody from the public wishing to speak? Yes.
You on the UMass,
That would have to take place during the public hearing portion on that. Any others? Then I guess we'll close the general public input, but we're going to get right into UMass West Campus. Before we do that, Paul, can you maybe give us a summary of the curveball that the state threw at us today?
So the Department of Housing and Community Development has been promising that they would be issuing guidelines with regards to the housing choice legislation for several months now. And of course, we got them this afternoon. So
Yeah.
I can't speak intelligently about the entirety of these. They need, I think, a significant amount of parsing. But there are some curveballs in there. One of the significant ones that I see is a requirement that the town have, there's actually some inconsistency and these are draft guidelines. These are not actual guidelines. But in the guidelines, it says in one spot that the town has to have 50 acres contiguous as part of a district. Another section, it says it has to have 25 contiguous acres, but a total of 50 acres zoned for the high-density 15-unit per acre housing. So we need to get some clarification from the state as to how that's going to be applicable. There are other portions of it that suggest that Chelmsford, would basically have to have 10% of its current year-round housing stock as part of districts that are approved for the high-density housing, which would essentially bring us up to like 1,400 units. Now, again, we need some guidance as to whether or not we can include zoning districts that already have been developed, that have high-density housing already, in which case this might not be that big of an issue. And
Okay, I see what you mean.
If we can't, then it might be a significant issue. So we need to, we need to spend some time getting into that. One of the other bigger concerns for me in the guidelines is that they really focus on the issue of housing that is available for families, and it specifically states that you can't have a zoning district that has a requirement that any portion of a development be age restricted. Now, here, we didn't have a requirement that any portion of the project be age restricted, but what we did have was provisions that, are pretty clearly leading towards an age-restricted project, because we know that a component of what is being proposed would be age-restricted. So I have made some suggested changes to the draft bylaw to address that, and basically taking out the language addressing age restriction, instead replacing it with affordable housing.
Understood, okay.
Because the age-restricted portion of the proposed development is proposed at 100% affordable. So rather than calling it out as age-restricted, I'm calling it out as affordable housing and defining it as 100% affordable, done by a nonprofit entity, affordable at 80% of area median income.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a curveball to me.
A little bit.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
not
it
25
may
acres.
very well be that
What's that?
It's not
our
25
best
acres.
course of action is simply to proceed as we were proceeding and
Yeah, so
catch up with the state.
from my perspective, worst-case scenario, if the town moves forward and approves this zoning bylaw and creates this zoning district, it at least gets us a good deal of the way towards compliance with the housing choice. Melissa, how big is this site? Like 38
31
acres?
acres.
Well, I thought it
31
was
acres?
22.
Minus the wetlands, we have, I'm pretty sure we have 31.
Does that count, though?
In
Close to
contiguous,
25?
yes, it is.
Oh,
Yes,
well,
you can-
okay.
6.75 wetlands, that doesn't include the buffer, so.
Okay,
So how do all these other, subject to any further limitations imposed by Section 40 of Chapter 131 and Title 5 of the State Environmental Code established pursuant to Section 13 of Chapter 21A, how does that affect the acreage that's involved in this?
I think that there's going to need to be some feedback with DHCD on that. The way I would interpret it would be that the unit per acre requirement is reduced by the amount of wetlands or area needed for septic or whatever under those provisions.
Or is it?
Because that's similar to how they do the density requirement under Chapter 40R. So I think it would probably be very similar in this instance, but there needs to be follow-up.
So is
with
it the
DHCD.
density requirement that's reduced, or is it the amount of area that you can count for your 15 units?
Well, the way,
Reduced.
the way it works under Chapter 40R is, it's the areas that are subject to wetlands, or in 40R, it's also steep slopes and other similar components, is taken out of the calculation for the density. So your site is still, 50 acres, but the calculation on the density might only be 35 acres, because that's the developable portion
Yeah.
of that site.
It's a lot of different things, even agriculture and other stuff, the same thing, because you can't,
Yeah.
you're never gonna get that 50 acre.
Yeah, no, you can't use it all.
Square part.
You
of
can't
land.
use it all.
Yeah.
But we still have that requirement for 1,400 units. So
Correct.
does that mean that if we were to allocate a 50-acre parcel under this, but only 35 acres was
So-
usable, we
so,
would have to permit a higher than 15
Well, that's
units per acre?
that's the interesting thing, because this doesn't actually require permitting of all these units.
That's right,
It just requires, a bylaw that allows,
that allows it.
As of
That permits
right.
it.
it comes straight out and says, we don't necessarily anticipate.
We don't think you're going to build these out.
Correct.
Or build all of these out by any means.
And again, a large majority of what's contained in here is far above and beyond what's in the legislation that was passed. So DHCD is sort of out on a limb a little bit here, and I am going to anticipate that there's going to be a lot of pushback from the municipalities that are impacted by this. So I wouldn't presume that this is anything close to a final document. It's still in the draft stages. They're waiting for feedback from municipalities, and, we'll see where it winds up. But in the worst-case scenario, even if this doesn't bring us to compliance, it's going to bring us a long way towards compliance. And we wouldn't be able to get there without it.
Okay, so I guess we simply proceed and let the greater legal minds work in the background and figure out what the state is up to. Very good. All right, with that said, this is the UMass West Campus public hearing. Why don't I turn it over to the proponents?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. For the record, Attorney Melissa Robbins from the law firm of Farrell and Robbins. I know you have an overlay in front of you tonight. I just want to go through quickly the red line changes that you can see. Some are Mr. Haverty's and some are ours, but I'll go through them all, and then you can direct the questions as appropriate. I think the first one is that you can see that the age restriction has been crossed out from here, and these units have been marked instead as affordable. This is for a variety of reasons. Some of them are conflicts between the MBTA statute and the Housing Choice statute itself, and some of them are because of the guidance that came out today. There's a significant discussion about affordability and age restriction. So even if a lot of it is struck, I think that you can see that an age-restricted project is very important to DHCD, that this is family housing and not age-restricted. Obviously, we have an easy way around that, is that we took the language for the age-restricted units and changed it into affordable, and the requirements that it be age-restricted will now be shifted to the development agreement. So you'll get all the same protections, it will just be split between the two documents instead of just in the overlay. The other change is that in section 12, you can see that we've added a section regarding banked parking. There's been a lot of discussion about how do we get to RM zoning requirements. I know we've gone through a lot of analysis that the developer feels as though this is significant parking that we don't need anymore, but how do we get there? We've actually designed, and I think in your packet you have a site plan of 2 separate parking areas for banked parking, which totals 65
It's not in their
banked
packet.
parking areas.
I don't see the,
There are 2 areas now on the site plan that show 2 banked parking areas. They're not in your packet this evening. But they are referenced in the overlay. And that will get us to the full total for RM.
Excellent.
So should we need to build the additional parking, should the developer be wrong, and the town find that there's a need to develop these parking spaces to be in full conformance, we can do that at a later date based on demand.
Great, thank you.
So there's a specific requirement in the bylaw in that now, and then at a later date, you will see the plan that shows that. The last edit, it's the number 18. You can see that per the request of your town council, there's a section in there regarding appeals. I had drafted some language with counsel from Nutter McClellan that I know that's on here tonight as well, and then Council Haverty has revised it slightly. So I think that's what's in front of you. 4 changes to the overlay this evening, those 3 changes. We're happy to answer any questions the board may have. I know that we were thinking about going into a more significant parking discussion, but I think with the addition of all of the parking spaces to get us up to the RM standard, that discussion's probably moot. But I'm happy to answer any other questions the board may have, and all of our consultants are available via Zoom, so they're also here to answer any questions the board may have.
So, Melissa, number 14, subsection 2, are we going to delete that?
Is that on the 2-story?
Correct.
Excuse me, yes, I did miss one. There was something on there about architectural standards regarding that it would look like a 2-story building. There is 2-story buildings. There will be no 1-story building, so that can be struck. Your council did point that out, so that section can be struck. It's unnecessary.
Okay,
The 2-story building will look like a 2-story building,
okay.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me run it around the board here. Who feels like being first up? You want to, otherwise, Paul, you want to take a shot? Any questions?
I don't think I have any questions.
Henry?
I think I'm good for now.
Mike?
I mean, the only question I had was, so the affordable housing is gonna be in the development package, developer deal now, right?
That's correct. All references to the age restricting in the affordable units will be shifted over to the
The
development
age
agreement.
restricted will be on that.
Yeah.
That's correct. This, in the development agreement, just to be clear, will have to be signed before town meeting so that you can have comfort in knowing that the affordable units would have to be age restricted in the
Now,
overlay.
does this new ruling have anything to do with counting of affordable as far as how many there are in this development?
No.
All right, that's
I didn't
just,
hear what you said.
the, it was supposed to be an MBTA-friendly community, and that's what this whole thing
Right.
was that you missed. And I was just trying to see if there was a new restriction in the new decision that just came out this afternoon that Paul's been wrestling with.
No, there's absolutely no guidance on that.
Okay,
All right.
great. Deirdre?
Mike, you and, am I going? Okay, so I guess I have a question, which might have been what Henry was asking. Is there any possibility that by saying, affordable instead of age restricted, and then eventually doing age restricted, that would knock us out of contention for an MBTA community?
So I will read you the provision of the draft guidelines that addresses that. It says, Section 3A states that a compliant multifamily district must be without age restrictions and must be suitable for families with children. DHCD will deem a multifamily district to comply with these requirements as long as the zoning does not require multifamily uses to include units with age restrictions and does not place any limits or restrictions on the size of the units, the number of bedrooms, the size of the bedrooms, or the number of occupants. And I do think we should address, the draft bylaw does have restrictions regarding the size of the units, but they're minimum restrictions. There's no maximum restrictions. I don't see any conflict with this guidance as it relates to that. Technically, even as originally drafted, the bylaw doesn't require any portion of the site to be developed as age restricted. And before this came out, I was comfortable, with that distinction, but given the additional focus on that issue and it's replete throughout the materials that came out today, I think we're better off eliminating any discussion of the age restriction from the bylaw, leaving it in the development agreement. Is there a potential that having that in the development agreement, could ultimately have DHCD come back and say, this is non-compliant? I can't rule it out, but I don't think it's likely, because, again, it's, at the end of the day, an applicant proposes what it wants to propose. You can't force an applicant to come in with housing for children. You can't prohibit them from doing an age-restricted project.
Okay.
Okay.
That's true with any project, not just this project.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
But this isn't being pushed as a housing with children, though.
No, that was just an
'Cause
example.
but all along, we've been hearing
One bedroom.
this development here, the developer, only a portion of a small percentage has kids.
That's right, but that
But
just goes to the state's policy that you don't restrict housing to not allow for school-age children. Some of them say that you can't have a restriction against school-age children, and some say you can't have an age restriction at all. This one just says you can't have a requirement that they be age restricted. So that would satisfy the requirement.
Okay.
So one other thing I just wanted to say was I appreciate the banked parking spaces and taking that problem off the table. I think that's it.
Nancy?
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I'm not buying the change of age restricted to affordable housing. First off, we're not requiring it to be age restricted. Age restricted is simply an option that allows you to have a higher density. And I don't believe that higher density that we were permitting from age restricted is or should be applicable to affordable housing, not to family housing. It basically, if you put little kids in that density of housing, they have absolutely nowhere to play. It's packed, it's crammed. I'm not buying that change.
But just to answer that question, you're still getting the same protection, it's just that it's being shifted to the development agreement. So it's still and I'll let your counsel speak to this as well, but that's, the protection's still there, it's just not in the overlay, it's in the development agreement, just like all the other agreements that we're making outside of the overlay.
But the problem is, we're not voting on the development here, we're voting on the bylaw, the zoning bylaw. And whether or not the development happens, if we approve this, we now have the zoning bylaw.
That's not true, because the zoning bylaw will not go forward if the development agreement is not signed.
Right.
And you don't have to take my word for that again, your counsel is here.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
this bylaw does not go forward to town meeting without an executed development agreement with that requirement in it.
Nancy, I think we've heard Paul Haverty say in the past that the development agreement runs with the land. So if Trammell or anybody else wants to modify the project,
They have to.
They have to modify the development agreement.
They have to talk to us.
so that's
Or
why
they
I
have to
keep
talk
saying
to
it's a
the Board of Selectmen.
project-based rezoning with the development agreement being the belts and suspenders. There's no unknowns here.
God, I hate this thing.
And just to answer a quick question, we did add a playground after
I
the
know.
first round.
Yeah,
So
I
I know
know.
that there's not going to, we don't expect
Yeah.
a high amount of children,
Yeah.
but we did put a playground within the development.
Yeah, but the point is, if you turn that age-restricted density into affordable housing.
Right.
You need a playground with that, too.
Sure.
And you don't have any space for a playground with that, with this density.
Right.
You don't have the parking provisions for it, for that density of affordable housing.
But just to clarify, that section was always going to be affordable. It was just going to be affordable, age-restricted.
I understand that,
And it still will.
but,
Correct.
and we expect that it still will by agreement,
Correct.
not by zoning. Okay, anyway.
Okay. No, it strikes me that to the extent we can dot i's and cross t's, given some question about which way the state's going, I think we've done the I dotting and T crossing. And I must say, I do appreciate that change, particularly for the parking.
Oh, yeah.
And I like the idea of banking it. It kind of gets us out of a hole.
Where on that
Yeah,
drawing does the
it
bank?
just covers the problem.
I'm just
Where'd
gonna
you put
poke
the
your point,
banks?
if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But so we've changed them to be two separate areas. There's now parking spaces here. You can see them banked, so they'll join to these
Okay.
ones if they need to be
Yep.
constructed. And the rest of them is actually a bigger area of parking right
I
here,
see.
which makes
Ending
it
up
makes
to-
perfect sense if we're going to build them later.
Yeah.
So those are the two areas of banked parking.
And where's the playground area?
I don't think it shows on this plan, but I can find it on the other
I
plan
believe it
set.
was up
Yeah.
in the
I thought it
middle
was-
there, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's in the middle area, but I'm not
Center,
sure. I
kind of.
can't
Pointer,
read it on the
pointer's
plan
there.
set.
Here, I
It's
think.
right there on the drawing.
Yeah.
Oh,
I do
there you
believe
see
that's
it.
That's
Okay.
what the parking is.
I do know it's behind the building and not in the
Yeah,
parking
okay.
area. Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. At this point, we will open up the public hearing. I see a few people here who may be interested in speaking. Is there anybody here who would like to address this project? Okay, the back there, and then you, sir.
I made a little drawing here. I'd appreciate it if you pass it around,
Okay.
discussing it.
All right. There's 4. I'm gonna need one.
Give us one.
Can you guys make do with, well, here, take 2, and if we get stuck, we'll. Okay.
Okay, so in the documentation that I handed over to the chairman last week after I spoke, that sketch was in there, but it was not completed. Tamla Crow's portion of it was not on that sketch.
Okay.
And today, this week, I went and I put it all on there. And you can see the amount of space that Tamla Crow is picking up there. There's no, they talk about parking here today, to add more parking, where are they gonna put it? And we're gonna put a leaching field in this place. They've never discussed sewerage in any meeting I've ever been in. Never discussed it. So that, I believe that the contamination, the ground contamination and its effects on Meadowood and Windermere are real. In other words, I think there's going to get contaminated water from that project, and it's going to flow down into Meadowood and to Windermere over a period of time. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but in a period of time. It's just like General Electric years ago went into Springfield and put up a big plant and built transformers there. And when it was cheaper to build them someplace else, they moved out and left the state with billions of dollars of cleanup. That happened over a long period of time. And I'm saying the contamination here will be over a long period of time. There's no location on any of Tamla Crow's drawings that indicate where a proposed leaching field is going to go. It's going to be a massive leaching field to take care of the waste of 800 people a day. The buildings and roads that are showed and the wetlands now show on this sketch. So you can see the wetlands of applied to it. Richard McEachran last week's remarks addressed the amount of wastewater generated on the site on a yearly basis. According to the Chelmsford Water Department, the average Mass resident uses 65 gallons of water per day. That will be approximately 800 people, 800 residents that will be occupy apartments on the Crow site. They will generate a yearly basis of approximately 18 million gallons of wastewater per year. Much of this water will have to be absorbed on site. The solids generated from the sewage plant will have to be removed. This unpleasant procedure has its problems. First and foremost, the smell, and maybe the cause of annoyance to the residents. With all the projected storage and contaminated groundwater pollution from the Crow site will surely have a big impact on Meadowood. And if I was living in one of the 30 homes along St. Andrew's Way that are 15 to 20 feet below the Umass property, I'd really be concerned. President Biden's Build Back Better legislation is still stuck in Congress. However, it will be approved. There will be a large amount of money allotted to infrastructure in this bill. This would be a great opportunity for Chelmsford to apply towards building a sewage treatment plant, possibly partnered with Westford. With the two towns together, it is possible that there would be enough funds to pay for land purchase and the treatment plant construction. The sewage treatment plant could be underway within a year. It would take 18 to 24 months to build it. I would suggest that no action be taken on rezoning the site at present. Place a 6-month or a 9-month moratorium on construction to allow the town of Chelmsford to come up with a plan to properly treat the sewage generated on this site. We're in the 20th century. It's time to build a treatment plant and stop flooding the lands with sewage. There's lots of talking going around present about cleaning the environment. Chelmsford, it's time to build a treatment plant. A lot of other towns are building it. Why isn't Chelmsford building a treatment plant? If the town of Chelmsford decides to approve and rezone and change this this zoning and grant a building permit to Town of Crow to build their proposed development, construction is planned. With this plan, the sewage lines in the road of the Crow project would be hooked up to the new piping in the town. The town will have to place in the Princeton Street roadway when the plant is placed online. I'm sure there are a lot of local developers in Chelmsford or surrounding towns that would be interested in developing this site as an over 55 community. There could be as high as 90 homes placed on this 22.6 acres of land. If a developer went the same route as the developer that built Windermere, placing homes a little closer apart together and adding a percentage of low-income homes, the same criteria to install the sewage piping in the roadway should apply to this developer. I am sure this approach would satisfy the town's low-income quota, and the town must meet the town must meet with the state. I see nothing wrong with the Windermere development. It is a very pleasant place to live in as is Meadowood, and I'd appreciate if the board would accept these minutes for the record. I'd answer any questions that anybody might have.
Okay. Well, we can certainly take that and put it in the record.
And there's
Give
one
me a
other
copy.
thing that I'd just like to, I'm 88 years old. I spent 60 years in the construction business, right, on the civil side.
Yeah.
I was a construction manager. I built Post Office Square in Boston. I built the high-rise at Beth Israel Hospital. I built this sewage treatment plant in Medway, Massachusetts in the late 70s. At that time, it was a $16 million job. It's a little bit more today. So anyway, I think I know a little bit about construction and about the problems that would come down the road for Chelmsford in the future.
Right.
So would you accept these? For
Yes, certainly. Get those over here, and we'll get them into the record. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll hold on to this for now, but we will get that in the record. Thank you. And I believe we have one other person who would like to speak.
Bob Stegmeyer, Windermere. I appreciate what the gentleman before me said about sewage, but he specifically mentioned later on down the road a sewage problem, not now in the next 2, 3, 4 years. So I'd like you to consider that the Tamil Crow people have tried their best to make us a nice facility here in town and listening to the town people. If this sewerage problem were to be later on down the road, as this gentleman said, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 years, by then, I think the town of Chelmsford would have a sewage treatment plant and just be able to put a pipe to it. So my only modification would be that from the existing sewage treatment plant, they put in whatever size pipe they need, empty, to get down to Princeton, ready for hookup 3, 4 years from now. I think that would be easy to accomplish in the plans. Give them an empty pipe to go down to the street, and when and if 3, 4, 5 years from now it's ready, they could switch over and take care of that. I think that would be an ideal solution to get this project going, because I think the town of Chelmsford needs this housing to help the people live in Chelmsford and work in Chelmsford. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Yes.
We are proposing a wastewater treatment facility on this property. We'll speak about this a little later this evening in the development agreement, but we have agreed to never connect to the town of Chelmsford sewer. We will always use our wastewater treatment facility. All new wastewater treatment facilities permitted in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts not only require full construction and you need to be operational before you connect to the wastewater treatment facility, obviously, but you also need a repair and replacement account. And I see David Formato is looking at me on the screen right now, so can I just give him a minute just to address
Please do.
that? Because
Please do.
he's the expert. So go ahead, Dave, if you can speak.
Thank you, Melissa. Everyone hear me okay?
Yep, we've got you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for having me. For the record, David Formato, President of On-Site Engineering, and we are the wastewater consultant tasked with by Trammell Crow with permitting, designing, and overseeing the construction of the on-site wastewater treatment facility. I think it's important to approach the concept of on-site wastewater treatment in a couple of levels. And if you would just indulge me for a minute, I'll kind of give you a little bit of a larger picture, but then dial it down to the specifics of this project. It's important to understand that topical for Chelmsford, the sewage that's generated in town that isn't directed into the ground via septic systems is collected in your system, and it's sent to Greater Lowell, which ultimately discharges into the Merrimack River. So that's what's classically known as a surface water discharge treatment facility. It's important to understand that when those facilities were designed and built in the 1970s and 80s, that was the thinking of the best means and methods of wastewater treatment and disposal. Those facilities don't typically treat to a high level of quality of effluent because they're being diluted into a very large body of water, i.e., a river or something along those lines. Circa the 1980s and 1990s, there was a fundamental shift starting at the federal level, working its way through to the state level, where surface water discharges, because of the water imbalance that they create, are no longer permitted. The Clean Water Act specifically has anti-degradation parts to it, which are very specific. You can't degrade a water body in quality and quantity more than what it is presently at. So essentially adding more partially treated sewage to surface waters triggers that anti-degradation issue. Furthermore, interbasin transfer and taking water that is essentially groundwater pumped out of the ground and used as drinking water and then putting it into rivers where it flows by the ocean creates a net deficit of water within these basins. And the most classic example probably everyone's heard of is the Ipswich River periodically runs dry. And that's a large part of that. So the state in particular has really put the focus on not transferring water from one basin to another. And the real mechanism for having that happen is groundwater treatment facilities with groundwater discharge. So long story short, the current way that wastewater treatment facility, whether it's on a private level or a municipal level, is done is exactly what we're talking about here today. It's just a question of scale. So if Chelmsford is going to be looking to do a regional wastewater treatment facility with Westford, so on and so forth, you are going to be looking to find areas to provide leaching so that treated effluent will be put back into the ground within the basin that the water is coming out of the ground as your public water supply. So that's kind of important to understand, because the proposal that we're looking at here for this particular site ticks off all those boxes. Were this site to be connected to the sewer, you would actually be making the interbasin transfer situation worse, as well as degrading the quality of the Merrimack River, whereby providing for high level, tertiary level of treatment at this site and then putting the water back into the ground at this site, you are ticking off those boxes. So that's really an important thing to understand. This is really considered the best available technology and treatment process for municipal and or private wastewater going forward. Further, I think it's important to note that, I'm not sure who's driving the slide, but building 1, which is the largest building, the one that kind of looks like an H with the leg missing, there is actually a leaching facility shown, and it is exactly right there. That is our effluent disposal field. That area has been tested with DEP to determine groundwater quantity, elevations, and the soil materials. We're in process of evaluating that data, but it's important to note that we do actually understand the size and scope and location of an effluent disposal system for this site. So sufficient size to handle all of the wastewater being generated on site, including the choice facility. Furthermore, if you can see just to the, southwest of that, there's a dashed blue line. Yep. That line actually is the zone 2 for Chelmsford's public water supplies. It's also the water resource district, the local protection district. That resource area protection is actually that point going off our site. And that's important for 2 reasons. One, it's important for the board and the public to understand that our discharge is going to be outside that district, so it's not going to be within that resource protection zone for a very good reason. We don't want it to be there. And the second thing is that line actually demarcates the boundary between groundwater flow direction. Within that line, heading to the south and east, is essentially water that's flowing towards the public water supply wells under their maximum pumping conditions for 180 days. Everything on the site going in the other direction to the north and east is where groundwater actually is flowing. And the data we have on site specifically has confirmed this. Groundwater is actually flowing in that direction towards the wetlands and ultimately towards the Merrimack River. So long story short, treated effluent that's going to be going into the ground in that leaching area is not going to be traveling towards Windermere and all the residents to the south. It's actually going to be traveling along the property towards the wetlands and ultimately towards the Merrimack River. So we are not going to be impacting whether it's quality of groundwater or quantity of groundwater to our neighbors to the south and to the southwest. So that's an important piece to understand, that that's already been looked at and determined as to which way groundwater is flowing and how we intend to approach that. I think it's also important to note that in terms of the treatment system that's being proposed, this is the next level up from what you typically see in a large municipal facility that's treating to the surface water quality standards. Typically, those facilities are treating the secondary level treatment. This facility, because we're discharging to the ground, where, again, anti-degradation requirements set the standards, we have to treat the tertiary level treatment. And what that means is it's all the standard same levels of treatment you would get for organic removal in solids, but you're also adding disinfection and nitrogen removal, because those are concerns for groundwater supplies relative to drinking water. And that's kind of the standard that we're always looking to meet. So this facility, at the end of the day, is going to be permitted through the Mass DEP, 2 stages. First stage is assessing the site to determine and certify what the quantity of effluent that can be disposed. And then the second stage is actually designing a treatment facility for their approval to meet all the standards that they're going to pose relative to the effluent quality. And the last point I would make is that it's important to understand that the effluent quality that we're talking about is actually going to be at the point of discharge. There is no treatment that's happening in the ground that we're taking credit for. There will be some, but the quality of effluent coming out of this treatment facility is going to be at or above groundwater quality standards for drinking water at the point of discharge, so that once it gets to the leaching field in the ground, it's already been treated to quality and quantity that is at or meets the standards for this groundwater prior to effluent disposal. This is different than a typical septic system, which has been referenced, whereas the leaching that's happening in a septic system field is just essentially solids removal in your septic tank, and then partially treated wastewater, sewage is going in the ground and creating potential pollution. We are removing all of that prior to it ever leaving the facility. So that's an important concept to understand, that this is such a high level treatment that we are going to really mitigate that at the source. And then the last thing I'd like to point out, just relative terms to maybe if people have questions about these private facilities and how do they work and how well do they work and potential pitfalls. We've touched on this in the past, but it is important to note that this program has been in place since the 80s, and I think we've shared this information previously, but there's almost 1,000 of these facilities in use. Some of them actually go back to the 80s that are still in use, and they perform very well. Do facilities have issues? Yes, that's not uncommon, but as we've noted, that there is going to be a high level of oversight from the state with monthly reporting. And there's going to be reserves and escrows put in place to the tune of several hundreds of thousands of dollars that can be accessed in the event that the facility does need work and repairs. I think it's important to note that, and I believe it may be one of the other meetings, the point in Littleton was brought up. That facility is probably not a very good apples to apples comparison. That's more apples to oranges, in that it's a commercial facility, it's mixed use. They have, obviously commercial users there. But that facility was also built in phases. There was essentially 2 phases envisioned at that site. The first phase was also part of the wastewater treatment facility. So essentially half the treatment facility was built in conjunction with the first phase of the development. Unfortunately, the phasing of the development exceeded the capacity of the phase 1 of the treatment facility. And I believe they're currently working on actually building phase 2. And that's really the issue that they're having down there, is that the system wasn't built in its entirety up front, and so they ran into some issues with excess capacity relative to how much sewage is being generated versus the capacity of the system. But once the second phase for this facility is put online, those issues should go away. And as that relates to this site, obviously this project is going to happen over multi-years. It's going to be a long process. The developer, Trammell Crow, is committing to building 100% of the treatment facility and leaching system from the word go. So it will be ready to treat the full flow the moment that the first occupancy permits are issued. And that's the way the state's going to require it be done. So, we're taking that type of stuff out of the equation where there shouldn't be those types of issues. So I think that it's important that we obviously provide some context to this and maybe a little bit of information that, hasn't been really presented in to date. But, to that point, if there's any questions from the board or whatever, happy to stay on and help, answer them. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. That's got a good explanation there. Anybody on the board have a question on any of that before I go back to the public?
I have
Okay.
a pretty basic question. What does happen to the solid waste? Does it,
Yeah, that's a great question. There are subsurface tanks at the site that collect that solid waste. That is, everyone understands the concept of septic tank. That is exactly the same concept. That material is stored on site and until such times it needs to be removed. And at that point, the operations group will have a pumper truck come in. Typical same thing as you would do with your septic system at home. And those tanks are emptied and then trucked off site for treatment at a larger facility. Whether it's Greater Lawrence or Upper Blackstone, something along those lines. Those large municipal facilities actually have the ability to receive that type of waste and treat it. So it's essentially stored and then shipped off site for treatment. So there will be periods of time where, yes, there is a pumper truck out there, emptying solids tank, but it's always scheduled. It's typically done during, low, during the day, during the week when there's low impact to the residents. But, by and large, it's a pretty standard process.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, I saw we have one more member of the public who would like to speak.
Jan Spence, 4 Door Knock Circle. You've heard all my issues with the project, so I'm not going to go over that. My concern tonight was after hearing some of the questions that were raised, particularly with the information that came out from the state today, it's going to take some time for this board to really address all of those situations and become comfortable with them. Now, in 5 days, it's my understanding the Board of Selectmen is supposed to come down with the date for a special town meeting to address this project. And the special town meeting was supposed to be in January. I don't see what the rush has to be to get this all in for January. You've got a regular town meeting coming up in April, and you've got a redistricted town, and I believe this particular area, I know at least Windermere and I believe Meadowwood have now moved from precinct 3 to precinct 2, and there have been adjustments like that, and you're going to have some new town meeting people coming in, I'm sure. And with everything going on, I don't see the rush. And a special town meeting in January to bring out 160 town meeting reps in the middle of winter, in the middle of COVID, and hope you're going to get a quorum is another issue too. And I'm just asking that, when you're talking, just consider some of these issues and see what might be in the best interest of the town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else from the public who would like to speak? Do we have, are you looking at the
I don't see anybody
Zoom?
on Zoom.
Nobody on Zoom? Okay. Well, at this point, we have a couple of choices to make. I think what we might be well advised to do at this point would be to close the public hearing and to go into our own. Yes?
Do you recommend closing the hearing? I mean, what if on Monday
What is our deadline for closing this and getting this onto the?
You're right. We said that from day one.
We don't
Yeah, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break here.
Okay.
Okay, during the break, there was indication somebody would like to say a little more. We have not closed the public hearing. So, sir, if you'd like to go ahead.
You know, as I say that, I think that they should put a 6-month moratorium. I don't see what the problem is. Tamil Crows come into town and they push the devil out of this thing to try and do it overnight, to get this approved overnight. I said in my first letter to the town that you got to take some time and think this thing out. You know, maybe you may have to bring some consultants in and talk to them. The consultant that just spoke, if he is still online, I'd like to ask him if the plant that they're planning on putting in is anything close to what they put in at the point in Westford.
Okay. Well, we can present that question to him.
Because Westford is not without problems. They've already been cited by the state.
Okay. Yeah.
So, you know, these new plants they're putting in, and he's saying that all this water is going to drain towards the Merrimack River. Water seeks its own level. I'm not a hydraulics engineer, but it seeks its own level, and it'll take the path of least resistance.
Okay.
So I still believe that Meadowood and Windermere are in for some serious pollution over a period of years.
Okay.
And I think that that you should be looking at this thing with, you know, a broader view than trying to satisfy Tamil Crow and push this thing through the town.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't agree with it.
Okay. Thank you. I see we have the proponent on the screen, or the representative. Would you like to address that?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chair, certainly happy to. The facility at the point it's a membrane system, albeit it's an older membrane system. It's been around for a few years. We'll probably use the same technology, but only because that's the most cost-effective, best available technology that produces the highest quality effluent. Essentially, recall that, you know, we're going to be processing wastewater to at or near drinking water quality using that system. Again, the point is really not a great comparison because their issues are directly related to the phasing of that facility and the fact that they built half the treatment plant and then put more than half the flow into it. And I do know this because we were actually asked at one point to do some consulting work on that site for one of the parties involved in it. So we do have some experience with that directly and understanding exactly what they've been doing, talking with the state about it. So, you know, the conclusion is that the system, had it been built to its full capacity from the outset, it wouldn't be having or experiencing the problems that it is having and experiencing. And you know, then also, I think it's important to understand again that, you know, groundwater direction is really established by, you know, it's not a micro thing, it's a macro thing. So groundwater moves in the state over large areas based upon the topography and the hydrology. So obviously, you know, water wants to collect at the Merrimack River because it's a low spot. So until you get to a geologic divide, hence the areas of the zone 2, the water from that point to the river is going to flow towards the river. And it really takes, you know, active measures to actually pull it in the other direction. So just adding more water to a location wouldn't actually change the groundwater flow. If that were the case, when you have, you know, a tremendous amount of rain, 40 inches over the course of a summer or something along those lines, groundwater direction would change. Obviously, that's an incredible amount of water flowing and falling on a particular piece of property that ultimately gets into the ground. And we do know that once that does happen, it does just move with the rest of the groundwater. So, and again, we've actually measured the elevations and the groundwater flow direction at that site, and it is indeed flowing towards the river, not in the other direction.
Understood. Thank you. Yes.
I just want to address this quickly before we close the public hearing. I've been hearing a lot about rushing and why are we going into this so quickly. I've been practicing law in Chelmsford for 17 years now, actually a long time. I've done a lot of development in the town of Chelmsford. I've done very large projects, very small projects, and never in the history of any of my projects have I ever spent the amount of time that we've spent on this project. I've never seen so much work go into an overlay. We've met with joint boards. We've met with every board and department, boards and commissions and departments I've never met with in the history of my practice in the town of Chelmsford. We've done all the abutter outreach we possibly can. We've had a public forum. We've invited town meeting reps. We've revised this document over and over again. Council and I have worked closely with it. We've tried to respond to every single request that has been made by every single department head. And I think to date, we've not said no to any of those. So I think that it's very important to note that we have worked hard on this. This has been reviewed and reviewed again. And at some point, it has to go to the town meeting reps to decide if it's something that the town wants. And I think we're at that intersection.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's time to move this along. The date may be, move around a little bit, but it is time to move this along.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make that clear before we close the public.
Understood. Thank you.
Just
Thank
wanted
you very
to
much.
add to that. I think, as Attorney Robbins said, part of the challenge that we collectively face at this point in the process is that there are very detailed questions being asked. And as the board knows, and this is probably good for the community, is that if and when town meeting approves the zoning, this has to go back to the planning board for a full hearing under site plan.
Right.
That is the point in the process when by technical reviews, detailed engineering studies are conducted. What we've heard to date is consultants engaging, their due diligence with their consultants engaging with the community process, this board, as well as town officials, in an attempt to identify if there are any deal breakers, any glaring red flags. And as you've heard, I think they've come back with more and more detailed information. So I just want to put that into context. As far as the hearing, I conferred with Attorney Haverty. My suggestion, and I think Mr. Haverty concurs, is for the planning board to leave your hearing open,
Okay.
with the understanding that you're reconvening with the select board on Monday. Between now and Monday, there likely will be additional people who express questions, comments, concerns. I think if the planning board is comfortable on Monday expressing your opinion, you think the overlay as drafted is final and good to go, but at least it leaves the hearing open up until a week or two prior to town meeting. In the event we get more information on clarity from the state
It's an
guidance.
interesting point. Good point.
Maybe there's further thought from the applicant, from the community, from the board. So it provides that flexibility moving forward. But I think the board, between now and Monday, would have to give some clear indication to the select board. And my expectation is the select board is going to be looking for some sort of indication from the planning board that the final draft is good to go from your perspective. Because my understanding, as was said earlier this evening, is that there appears to be an expectation that the select board on Monday night will consider scheduling a special meeting.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with the planning board or really, what you're doing this evening or what will take place on Monday. But like I said, I think leaving the hearing open, there's no harm in that, and it provides for additional opportunity to revise if necessary.
Well, okay, I see your point. I am a little bit concerned that we simply drag on meeting by meeting by meeting, and if we're expecting the select board to actually approve a development agreement perhaps Monday, we should be prepared to act likewise. Now, is there any complexity or difficulty in us coming back to the bylaw change after the development agreement has been ratified? Or what's the ordering of these two activities?
The select board doesn't have to ratify anything on Monday.
Yeah, if they don't want to, if they're not planning to ratify anything Monday, then we can.
Yeah, I mean, my only concern would be if it impacts the select board's willingness to ratify anything, knowing that the bylaw remains open.
Right, that's my concern. You put it in many fewer words than.
I can't speak for the select board, as to how they will see
Yeah.
this. They may have concern or they may not.
Well, I mean, we could do a straw poll as well.
Yep.
Well, I was suggesting keeping it open.
Yeah.
Because I thought it would be viewed as the right thing to do, just in case. If the planning board is confident in your work with council and the proponent, that you're satisfied with the draft as is, then close the hearing. I'm not suggesting keeping the hearing open so that every time the planning board meets, that the public's invited to comment. The planning board decides, right? So you could decide this evening that that you're, for all intents and purposes, you're not taking any more public testimony.
Well,
And you're
I
just
think
putting it
that's-
on hold.
Yeah. Okay, do I have any, let me get the sense of the board here. What do board members feel?
Attorney Howard.
I'm sorry?
The only additional point I would make is, even once you close the hearing and take a vote on this, it's not at all unusual, prior to a town meeting for there to be amendments
Right.
to a bylaw.
Yeah,
And-
but
and-
amendments really confuse the town
It
meeting.
won't be a
maps.
planning board amendment.
Well, no, it could be. I mean, if the planning board saw something that needed to be addressed in between closing the public hearing tonight and commencement of a town meeting, it could actually propose an amendment that wouldn't even need to be voted on at town meeting, because it would be a friendly amendment, because it would be the planning
That's
board's
true.
article.
That is true.
So
Procedurally.
now, but of course, you will always be limited to the scope of the bylaw that was originally noticed. So if you need to go above and beyond what's already out here, you might be limited in that regard. If it's simply fine
yeah.
tuning some language that's already included, I think that you would still have that opportunity.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Henry.
Paul, would you feel more comfortable having till Monday night to go over the changes?
Yeah, I think that I would, I mean, I definitely rushed through reviewing this today.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're going to get any more clarity.
Okay.
The public comment
All right.
on the draft guidelines is open until March 31st.
Can I ask, is there other resources available to you in terms of getting more information from the state, to the extent that they're able to
They don't
provide it?
know.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. I think they're going to be overwhelmed with questions from municipalities. I can certainly reach out. I know plenty of people at DHCD. I can reach out to my contacts there and see if they can.
but like, we had sent something out before, or you had sent something out before and got a response back that we were eligible.
Site was eligible.
Right.
The site was eligible. So can you elaborate more on that? Like, so the site being eligible, now if they're wiggling on the very specifics,
Correct.
that could be,
Right.
the site might be eligible, but not this plan.
Correct, and not this bylaw, and unfortunately, we will not be able to get that sort of feedback from DHCD until they formally adopt guidelines, which won't happen
For notice.
any earlier than March 31st, and probably
Yeah.
significantly after that.
Okay.
So,
All right.
have we reached out, have we expressed our concerns with what they put out so far? Has Chelmsford?
It literally
As in-
No,
just came out this
today.
afternoon.
So we are gonna respond within a short period of time?
It doesn't matter whether we respond in a short period of time, they're not gonna take any action on any proposed
But they're waiting for
changes.
everybody to.
They're waiting for,
Yeah.
for a statewide
So we should do that as
response.
quick as possible.
Yeah, now, well, I would say Attorney Haverty's assessment there is right. They're going to get deluged. They're going to get deluged on this because,
We were the first ones in.
They will.
well, I'm not sure it matters because I think all municipalities are going to say almost exactly the same things.
Right, although I will say, we're probably much further along
Yeah,
than most
on a
communities.
particular project.
On a
Because we have
particular
this
project.
Okay.
I don't know that we'll get any feedback on this particular project, but there at least can be, I can reach out and see if I can have conversations about certain aspects of the
Yeah.
proposed guidance.
Wait till Monday.
Yeah, I think we're going to wait till Monday, which of course would take a motion to continue the public hearing.
So be.
Moved
Second.
Seconded? All in favor?
Monday,
Aye, yeah.
so I'm going to post a meeting for you.
Yep. Post us. We don't necessarily have to do anything at that one, but we can.
Okay.
So post it for Monday.
Why wouldn't you
I
just
think
leave it
that
open?
we should have a conversation, though, about, barring any significant development of new information between now and Monday, at least maybe take a straw poll and talk about what are our thoughts on the matter at the moment? Can we do that with the public hearing open, or no?
Let me suggest that if we're going to leave the public hearing open and leave the possibility of taking public input open, it might be best for us not to put a stake in the ground
Okay.
right at this moment. Well, I'm sorry, we're continued at this point, but,
So we're gonna have another meeting Monday before?
well,
the
Monday
selectmen meeting?
is the selectmen's meeting, and we can simply do it
I
simultaneously
think it's the
with them.
20th.
Or the 20th, rather.
So you can't do it simultaneously, you gotta do it before that. Because because they're looking for a recommendation.
I'm sorry, the 20th is this Monday.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
But-
that's what I thought.
Is is select board
Christmas is next
looking
week.
for a recommendation from this board Monday?
If I were the select board, I'd be looking for a clear indication as
Yeah.
to what's going on with the planning board and your overlay.
What time is their meeting?
I don't
time?
want to put words in your mouth here, but months ago, you did take a straw poll,
Yeah.
conceptual vote to
And we
support the
conceptually
concept.
supported it.
You've now gone through
Unanimously.
15 iterations of a zoning bylaw. The planning board collectively or individually I am not hearing any
Yeah.
reservations.
But we're not gonna take a vote tonight, we're gonna do that Monday, you're saying? Because you wanted to keep the public input going until we hear from the state.
We want Paul to.
Yeah, you're not going to hear anything between now and Monday.
So why?
And I think what I heard what Attorney Haverty say is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but.
Everyone else does.
I'll attempt to, was that you didn't view the lack of clarity on the MBTA to be a reason to delay or grind to a halt this process. That if this gets adopted, it only helps get us closer to an eventual MBTA compliance.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my only,
But why would
my
you-
only reason for saying that you shouldn't have closed the hearing tonight is to give me till Monday to delve deeper
And see if there are any
this
gotchas.
guidance that literally just came out this afternoon.
Okay.
But
I think that's fair.
Evan, you suggested leaving it open past Monday into January.
I don't think that's a problem
no, no.
unless Attorney Haverty says.
No, and I agree with you. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is I think we
Right.
leave it open.
Because what may happen.
After the recommendation to the select board.
Right, but I think you, meaning the
Yeah.
board, need to make that very clear to the select board. They have a representative here tonight. Again, I'm reading the tea leaves here, and if I were in the audience or at home watching,
Yeah.
there's no indication that an individual board member or the board collectively is not going to support this draft. It's your
Right,
draft.
no, we've made that clear before. And we don't leave it open to a particular time. It's open until we close it.
No, I understand
Yeah,
that,
so-
but what you're telling right now is you're gonna close it Monday.
But we may or may not.
It
but
sounds
we'll
like
have to
that,
see.
but
I think
Well,
there's,
the
I think there's
select
benefit to
board.
leaving it open. For
Yeah.
example, after Monday, Haverty, myself, others may engage with DHCD. We may get some
Guidance.
clarification that may be of value.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm just trying to, there's two different proposals on the table here. There's one to leave it open past December 20th, and then there's another one that I'm
No,
hearing.
it's just to leave it open. We can't leave it open until it's
You
open
can pick-
or it's not.
You can pick a date
Yeah, we
specific.
can
so
take
can I-
it,
right
but
now,
even
you
at
can-
that,
let
it
me ask
doesn't
a question.
automatically close.
Are you gonna make a recommendation on Monday with it open or closed?
Let's find out.
Correct.
What, if anything, happens over the weekend. From
Reconvene-
now until.
reconvene
In
on
other
Monday
words, you
evening.
don't know whether you're going to make a recommendation one way or another.
But I think you're prepared to,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we certainly could vote now, but there's no point in us doing so. Let's,
All
Let's
my point
gather.
is, you don't want to show up Monday night and have the board discussing whether you support the bylaw.
Right.
If you need that discussion, have that tonight.
yeah.
I think we're kind of beyond that, but I
believe
could be
we are. I
mistaken.
believe we are.
And you've already closed. And
Have
you've
you
already
said-
closed the hearing.
we've
for
closed
Yeah,
tonight.
we've
for
closed the
tonight.
hearing, so.
But tonight, continue to Monday.
Continue to Monday. Yeah.
All righty.
What time Monday? We do have
what-
we do have lives outside of here.
Yeah, you too, huh?
So what time Monday, so we can
6
review,
o'clock.
review our
What
schedules?
time's the,
There's clarification from the back of the room.
No, are you meeting on Monday?
I thought you were.
Right, but you're saying to continue a hearing to the select board meeting
We're
on
gonna-
Monday. We don't have a hearing on our agenda on Monday. So if you're gonna continue to a date, it should be continued to your next meeting, I think.
Now, let me clarify this. When we continue, we continue. We don't really have,
Provide the public a date that you're continuing it to, not
that is a good point.
I'll post it for 6 PM and 2:05.
Okay.
And then when the agenda comes up for select board, you'll come into
Yeah,
the
we
room.
can always
Time's the select board
pull
meeting?
that if this, huh?
what time is the select board meeting?
6.
6. I mean, again, you're reconvening at 6, Monday night, not for any specific purpose.
Right.
If the agenda comes up and the select board in the community want to hear an update from the board, you're all there.
Mm-hmm.
And if for some reason they want to vote, you can take a vote right there. Because you've scheduled a meeting.
And it
Not a
gives-
joint meeting.
Yeah.
It gives
You have your
Paul
own
a little
meeting, you
more
just happen
time
to be in
Yeah,
this room.
to go figure
during
out
the
what's going
agenda
on.
time.
Yep.
We don't need to overcomplicate this.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh, what?
The whole
Believe me,
point-
it's already
The whole point of
overcomplicated.
keeping the hearing open
Yeah.
was to accommodate the public and the process in the event necessary.
But it does mean that we will have to be prepared to take public testimony
Yes.
on Monday.
Yeah,
Monday.
We have to be prepared to do that.
Well, we can't hijack their meeting. We'll have to have our meeting
We
in a
have our own
different
room.
room.
Our own room. There's more than one room in this
I don't
place.
think you don't need to, I don't think you need to take it. I don't even need to open it, I don't even need to like, I don't even
You don't
need,
need to take, what, public testimony?
We do
we
now.
do if it's still an open public meeting.
Yeah, you're not required to take public testimony at every session of a public hearing. I think it's
it's more
always,
procedural.
I think it's
Yeah.
always best
It always,
to do that.
well, that's my feeling as well. I mean, I don't want to tell people we're continuing and then
Right.
not
I
give a
think-
final shot.
I think Virginia's point is that the select board hearing doesn't have this as a discussion
Right.
on their agenda, so it would not properly be part of the select board's hearing
Mhm.
on Monday night. The idea of you doing it in a different room and then, sort of monitoring what goes on the
Yeah.
select board's hearing and reconvening and basically taking a vote if you deem it appropriate,
Okay.
it would be fine.
I think that's exactly what we need to do.
We're not
But-
voting Monday,
We'd be voting for recommendations.
right? But we're
For
not
the
gonna do that
selectmen.
Monday. We're not really.
Then do the straw poll recommendation tonight, and then continue the hearing to the 12th. And then just schedule a planning board meeting for Monday night, so you can join the select board's meeting and tell them you took a straw poll. And as far as the board is
Well, I had
concerned, you're-
suggested the straw poll a couple of minutes ago, and it didn't seem to go over too well, but,
So if you were going to do a straw poll, you should first take a vote to reopen the hearing for tonight.
okay, that's procedurally, that's the way we would do it. All right, let me look around. Are people inclined to do a straw poll? Okay, I see some yeses. I see some yeses.
fine.
All right, I will take a motion to reopen the public hearing.
I'll move to reopen, or I'll second.
I have move, and I have a second. In favor? Aye. Okay, we are technically back open. Now, I will entertain additional comments, but please make them new ones. We've covered a lot of material, and if you have a new point to make, we will gladly listen to it. Then, go ahead.
As an abutter to this property that spent $500,000 for a house a few years ago, I like this project, and I would like to see this project next to me. Thank you.
Okay, well, that wasn't new, but thank you anyway.
For him, it was a new point.
Okay.
It's a new point.
All right. Okay, we are in open public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing?
No, we're going to leave it open. But we can take a straw poll. And I'd like to see a show of hands. How many people here are inclined to advance this bylaw proposal
For the selectmen.
to the selectmen?
Yep.
I am. It's 4, 5, and we
Nancy's
have
no.
5, and we have a no? Okay. We have 5-1, so the straw poll is 5-1. We can report that to the selectmen. That may help.
I think we should have a brief discussion with the straw poll, if it's not out of order, about our reasoning.
There's no reason, certainly no reason we can't,
All right, want me to go first?
if you like.
Okay, so we did approve this project conceptually unanimously some months ago. And I feel there's a number of things about this project that are beneficial to the town. I think one being the 54 units proposed as affordable housing, age-restricted, which has the two benefits. One, providing housing that we desperately need, affordable housing that we desperately need, and two, bringing us over the 10% state mandate, getting us back into the safe harbor. I feel this is a high-quality development. I feel that this land will be developed, and I think it's to the town's advantage and to our advantage that we do it in a partnership with a developer who's so community-friendly and in close collaboration with both us and the abutters and the community, and open to various mitigations that I think are helpful and appropriate to the town. And then finally, the additional benefit, which I guess is now in some question, of us becoming an MBTA town, which seems to have quite distinct benefits in enabling us to apply for state funding that we otherwise are unable to unlock. And I think that's a considerable benefit to the town as well, assuming that that's still a feature of this development. So those are my reasons for supporting this.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to comment?
Well, I honestly believe that the devil is in the details, too.
Yes, and
Got
that,
a lot further to go, even if this gets by town meeting. This is just getting a bylaw that then we gotta do our regular open hearing.
yeah,
and
that's
it's
going to be
a lot.
the site plan.
Site plan, there'll be a lot
That's where
to
the
it.
work is going to be.
I know that what a lot of people don't understand is even when we pass this, if it passes at town meeting, it's got to go in front of the AG's office.
Right.
And that's another 4 months down the road.
Yeah.
And then you got to start your public hearings and everything else. So even best case scenario, they're a long ways out.
Yeah. Okay.
But I
And
also
that's if everything goes smoothly.
But I also think that, based on the previous things that have come before town meeting, that it's incumbent upon us, as the planning board, to support this and to say, to make a clear case and to own it and to support it to the town and have a ready explanation of why we're supporting it if we are,
Yeah.
if we expect any possibility of it actually passing.
I honestly,
I agree with everything.
I would agree.
you said.
I agree with what you said, and I think Trumbull Cove has done a really good job of reaching out to the neighbors. They have sat down with everybody that wanted to listen to them and everybody that didn't want to listen to them.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for the outreach that they've done, I would not have supported this at all.
Right, I would agree.
Me too.
Definitely help.
Nancy, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I do. So I guess I want to start out with a statement that I absolutely support this development. I think this is good for the community. It's possibly the best thing that could happen to that site. This is just a really good solution by a reputable developer. And I'm just amazed at the work that they've done to reach out to the community and sell this project. So the project's not what I have a problem with. It's the bylaw that I have a problem with. And I think the two things that I'm having real difficulty with is the representation of this bylaw being put in place to meet the Section 3A requirements of the Acts of 2020 in terms of selling it to town meeting on the basis that this buys us something. And I have heartburn with that because, frankly, the state, by their own statements today, don't really know what that means yet. So it's really hard for us to say this does or doesn't give us any kind of solution to qualifying for funding under that. So I think in that respect, it's a misrepresentation. And I have problems with changing the age restricted to affordable housing because the requirements that we put in here for age restricted just are not applicable to our affordable housing. So that's my rationale. And
That's good
you know,
reason to keep the hearing open to the 12th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let Nan, continue to think about it.
Yeah.
Let Attorney Haverty maybe bring
Yep.
back some
I think that's a
clarification to
grand
the
idea.
board.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not opposed to the project at all. I'm absolutely in support of it.
All right. You happy?
I'm fine.
Okay, in that case, now, we've spent a couple more minutes discussing, but I think we are at the point where we now continue.
A motion to continue.
To the 12th.
I have a motion to continue to the 12th.
Second?
All in favor?
Seconded, all in favor? Aye. Unanimous? Okay, now let
If
me,
you're continuing the public hearing to the 12th,
yeah,
how are you going to have a discussion about this on the 20th?
They're not going to need to. They just had the discussion and then
Right,
they're going.
so you're not going to meet on the 20th?
They're going to,
That's right.
no, we're going to post a
We just
meeting.
freed up our Monday.
yeah.
Monday got free.
But
Yeah.
don't you want to attend the select board meeting?
Oh, I'll be there. I wouldn't
Probably.
I'm
miss
not
it for the
posting a
world.
meeting, just some of you will show up and you can update the,
Right, we'll give them an update on.
Well,
what-
if a quorum is going to be there and there's going to be any discussion
I'll
by
post it.
any members of the planning board, you should post
I
it.
will post it.
So do we have
Post it,
to,
I suspect we won't have a quorum, but it could happen.
do we have to be on their agenda for a discussion?
No, you're not discussing anything. You're providing an update to them.
Yeah.
But is the update on their
Reporting.
agenda for Monday?
I think that it would be helpful if we could add that to the agenda.
I
Yes.
assumed it
Put
was,
that on.
but maybe it's not.
Maybe it's not.
Can we ask Virginia, who's here, if it is or not?
Hi, Virginia.
I didn't think there was a meeting on the 6th for
Because,
River Neck.
because someone said it was, but there isn't.
There isn't, all right.
Hi, Virginia Crocker Timmons, 28 Lovett Lane, and I'm speaking as a member of the Select Board. Right now, the current planned agenda item for Monday night is to review the next revision of the development agreement. We don't have planning board input on the zoning agreement on the agenda, but it's not too late to add it if you think that you would like to come give us some input on where your status is.
Okay, well, I think it would be useful for us to at least report what we've done tonight.
Sure.
And we'd be very brief. It's not going to take a lot of time, but we probably want to be on the agenda for
So,
that.
but legally, the planning board can take care of their own noticing, because our agenda is only posted as a select board
Right.
meeting agenda.
No, that's correct. Yeah, we'll take care of our own
So the-
noticing.
the
So
reason-
we'll add that in the morning before it gets posted. I'm sorry, Evan.
The only reason I was encouraging the board to attend is that I was under the impression that on the 20th, there was going to be some conversation,
About
To-
the development agreement.
but also about scheduling a town meeting.
Yeah, so it's not on the agenda because we're waiting for the queue from when the planning board is ready to
We're
have
going
the
in
town
circles here.
meeting.
This is why I
So-
said to the board,
So that's fine. We can,
you should make it your business to make it clear to the select board and the community that as far as you're concerned, the zoning bylaw is ready to go.
We will-
That way, no one can use it as a reason to say, we can't schedule a special town meeting.
Well, that, by the way, is why I suggested that we
Yes.
close the
We're on the same-
hearing and vote on it.
We're on the
And
same
it was
page.
suggested that we not do that.
Because what you're hearing tonight and what you'll likely hear
Yeah.
Monday
Yeah.
is that it's rushed, it's not ready. The narrative on Monday will be, the planning board is ready to go. And it'll be up to the select board to decide. If they want to delay it, it's not because of the planning board not being ready to go.
Yeah, well, we've done that with a,
Yeah, exactly.
we've done that with a straw poll.
You've done your job, you've moved this as far as you can.
Okay. We good?
I think so.
See you Monday. I'll see you Monday night.
So just to be clear, it's a planning board update on the zoning article to the
Right.
select board.
Yeah, we'll just tell you where we're at. Yeah, you already know what I'm going to say, but,
Well, I can't speak for the select
well,
board.
you can't speak for us, but you've heard it all. Okay. Thanks a lot, Virginia. Okay, what else do we have?
Gonna do the development agreement.
Huh?
The quick conversation, update on the development agreement.
Yep. Okay, what's changed in there? I took a look, so.
I'm still here. Good evening, Mr. Chair. For the record, Melissa Robbins. I'll run through the changes to the development agreement.
Okay.
I think a couple of them are actually in direct relation to some comments the planning board had made at their
Yeah.
last meeting, so I'd like to run through those quickly if I can. In section 1B, we've removed any language regarding connection to the sewer line later. It now states that we will only use our wastewater treatment facility.
I just want to clarify, I don't believe that was a request of any town official.
That was a request from a butter that we thought was fair to put in there.
Okay,
So we did amend it to put that in there, because the wastewater treatment facility is going in, so there's no need for us to connect to any sewer
Okay, and
capacity
actually, that
later.
discussion that we had earlier this evening really clarified a lot of that.
Yes. Some of these are just suggestions for the Board of Selectmen. We fixed some capitalization in section 3A and added the word sole before discretion. But I think this is the first, section 4A is the first section where we have taken the planning board's requests into consideration. I know that Deirdre had brought this up at the last meeting regarding the school department number, which was set at 60,000. Just so this board knows, we did go meet with the school committee. They are comfortable that their report is going to cost $60,000. But there is some questions about some extra funds that could be needed, and I'll turn over to Paul for that, because I think he's got some communication from the chair. I just want to talk about that before we get into this section here.
Yeah, I did receive communication from the chair of the school committee indicating that while there was agreement on the cost of the study to be $60,000, there was at least more than one school committee member who indicated that they would like to see some additional funding. Wasn't specified exactly what it would go to or what the amount would be, but just to address additional costs that may be incurred by the school department that they would not be able to get funding through the town, based upon increased tax revenues, because they might be something that occur sort of at the beginning of the process. So, and Melissa, I know that I'm going to sort of steal your thunder here. So the applicant had proposed 2 additional PILO units at a total of $120,000. And my suggestion is, and Deirdre, I recall your previous comment, was that you thought that the school department number came in lower than you expected, so you wanted to see that money then directed towards additional PILO units. But I'm wondering, rather than direct that towards additional PILO units, whether it should be directed to the school department to address any potential shortfalls that they may have. So it would then be 120,000 additional, so a total of 180,000 to the school department.
Is it either or?
Well,
No, and I had one other.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
ultimately,
Yeah.
ultimately, it's the select board
It's the select
who's
board's call,
executing
not
this.
us, not
Right.
us.
But I definitely wanted to have this discussion with the planning board, since the impetus came from Deirdre at your last meeting.
Right.
But I
Maybe
do see.
120 each. 120 more to the schools and 120 more.
So my suggestion
I'd rather
was to-
see it go to the PILO.
Right. Right now, in the agreement, after the last discussion of the planning board, where if there's no clear indication, where would you like the extra funds to go? The indication was affordable housing.
Yeah.
So right now, what we've agreed to do is an additional 2 units,
Okay.
Paul's already told you, for additional $120,000 would go directly towards affordable housing.
Indication.
We're still keeping in that $60,000 for the report for the school committee, that they already understand that number. But this $120,000 would be over and above what we've already discussed.
That will be a help.
Yes. So and I think that, I think that it's going to be important for just the Board of Selectmen to understand how this number all came about, and the planning board generally was acceptable, the planning board member where it came from and other agreed, this is a generally acceptable number for them, and this would satisfy your concern, since the concern started there. So I just would like to hear a little bit about that.
So then we would have 15%, 54 plus 6 from the structure, plus an additional 6 in the pilo, so bringing us up to 16%, correct?
I think it's 8 in the pile
Well, now
Eight
plus
in the
the
pilo.
2
Yes.
would make it, whatever, 16.33.
It doesn't go towards our account, the pilot does not.
It goes into the Affordable Housing Fund.
Right.
It doesn't go
Yeah.
into our percentage.
Percentage.
True. But with the hope being that it actually would
Someday.
create more
yeah.
housing
Yeah.
than that amount.
Well, Mr. Hedison's record's pretty good on that.
Well,
Yeah.
and just to this
Yeah.
board's point, we've been putting a lot of money in the pile for all these other projects, and there's been a lot of question about what good is it if we're not building affordable housing, but if this actually goes forward, and a special town meeting goes forward, David Hedison will actually get to use that
right.
pile of money that this board has worked so hard in putting in there, so it is going to come full circle, so, I'm glad that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay?
I personally would rather let the school have it.
You did all the work, though.
Yeah.
But
just-
again,
Yeah.
ultimately, it's a determination for the select board. They're the ones that are
But they're
executing,
looking for guidance.
and they are looking for guidance.
So just to assist here a little bit, this board, with your engagement with the proponent, has clearly articulated your rationale for your ask. And you've been engaged in a successful cooperative discussion. And, Deidre, you made that specific ask. The way it's been presented this evening is that it was several members of the school committee. It's not even the full committee. So at least your discussion that you put on the table at the last meeting was a full discussion with the planning board. I mean,
Yeah.
if the school committee wanted to articulate a further ask, they had the opportunity to do that. And I'm not, this is the planning board, and the request on the additional affordability came from the board. And that's what's being proposed back. I understand what Attorney Haverty's trying to do for Monday night. But if the board feels strongly about your ask from the proponent and the proponent's proposal back to you, satisfying your ask, I would make that very clear to the select board on Monday night.
Okay. Sold.
I mean, unless the full board wants to have a conversation about redirecting it.
No.
No.
I mean, that's not what we do.
Okay.
So the other two changes was just in section 5, there was a clarification, refer back to the section relevant to the crosswalk.
Yeah.
And then 7 and 8, we just had to capitalize some terms, and there was actually a hangover note in there from me from the school department to try to figure out, from Deirdre's comment from the last planning board meetings, where, if we could get extra funds, where they would go. And then we got directions from this planning board to go to the affordability section, so we did put it there. There's some, I don't know if in the comments you have, there's some marginal comments from Mr. Haverty. One of them is about the acreage on the choice piece, and that is 2.09 acres for anybody that's interested. The other is about the minimum size for the conservation restriction, which would, the minimum size would be at least all of the wetlands, which would be 6.75 acres, but I would say that's the basement. Obviously, the conservation restriction can encompass a lot of things. It can even encompass pocket parks and some of the open space recreational areas. So I think the number will go up from there, but the minimum would be 6.75
And just
acres.
to update the board, Attorney Robbins was in front of the Conservation Commission at their last meeting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Conservation Commission's unanimous decision was to have a local CR, not overcomplicate it and make it a state CR. So that will have to be reported, updated accordingly on Monday night as well.
Gotcha.
Melissa, once the conservation restriction land is removed from the whole and the age-restricted development land is restricted from the whole, how much acreage is left?
Well, the conservation restriction actually won't be removed from the property. It's not going to be conveyed out. Actually, the Conservation Commission here said they would be the holder of the CR. So what happens, and I probably don't have to explain to you, is that it just is an easement on your
It's an easement.
property where the
Okay.
Conservation Commission would.
So it's not a transfer.
That's correct. And then they actually would agree to hold the conservation restriction, and that would really give them a lot more resources to protect their interests out
Right.
there, which we discussed was like trying to get rid of a lot of the invasives, protect the resource areas and maybe some other things. But they were just very concerned about, not turning it into, I forget exactly the term that they used, but they didn't want it to be mowed down and paved and it turned into a really heavy recreation area, more of a vista, but getting rid of the invasives. So the two takeaways from conservation was they'd like to hold the CR and they'd like it to be a local CR.
Okay.
And really, those were the only changes to the development agreement since the last time you folks have reviewed it.
So where is the stated piece of the age-restricted piece in here now?
That will have to be put in there. So that all came about this afternoon, so Attorney Haverty and I will be working on that very bright and early tomorrow morning as.
And it actually will be part of a separate development agreement.
That's correct.
With the affordable housing developer.
So there's two development agreements here, one that we're really focused on, which is the one where all the mitigation is, but there's actually a separate development agreement which will be with SCG, the Choices for-profit development partner, which will ensure that the units are held affordable and they will also develop their property the way that they are supposed to on their 2.09 acres. And so the affordability requirements for the age restriction will go in there. It won't be difficult to draft.
Good.
I say that because I'm going to have Attorney Haverty do that.
Good move.
Someone else putting words in my mouth.
But those were all the changes since the last time the development agreement came before this board.
So it sounds as if the agreement and the proposed bylaw are really beginning to sync up quite nicely.
Yes.
So I have a question that's outside of this, but it has to do with the general project. I don't know if I can ask that at this moment, or if I'm speaking out of turn.
Yeah, we
We're
close
closed.
that.
Let's wait till we open
Okay.
things up again. Okay. Thank you.
So if you want
Yep.
to continue this discussion as well to your meeting on the 12th, if there is any further questions, we can do that
Right.
along with the,
Well, we'll try to get him, if people do have questions,
Right.
get them to Evan, and we'll try to get them to you way ahead of time.
thank you very much.
Do we need to
Thank
vote
you.
on this at all? Do we need to
No,
vote?
there's
No,
nothing we
it's
need to
not
vote on.
ours.
This is informational. This is not something that we approve. Okay, any?
Need one
new-
more.
One last question.
Yep. Hold on, we are not in public hearing at the moment. I mean, is this a procedural question?
Well, it was just, my question is that when the public gives their input,
Yeah.
what happens to that input?
We hear it.
Do you hear it? Does it go to the other committees and everything? or-
No, well,
Hear it.
if it's written, it's available to them should they want it. But if it's oral testimony, we hear it. To some degree, it may make it into minutes, but not necessarily, and that's it.
Yeah, I just don't want to be coming here spinning my wheels, you know?
I understand, and that's
Okay,
a
thank
perfectly
you.
reasonable view to take. Okay, on old business, new business, we have process, but I'm not sure that we have any
Table it.
process to deal with tonight. We can table that one. I don't think there's, unless somebody has a burning issue reporting, liaison reporting. In that case,
Turn into a pumpkin. I'm turning into a pumpkin. I gotta leave.
Then
well,
I
why
would
don't you make a
Motion to agenda, to adjourn.
Second.
See ya.
Oh, aye.
Aye.
He gets grumpy if I'm not there.